Hey, Nani. Hey, Nani. Hey. Oh, hey there. And welcome to Weekly Lit, episode 28, part three, and the rousing finale to the surprisingly popular Midwinter's Shakespeare Fest. And here comes a cat, Prince, coming in. So I may have a co host here shortly. So today we are going to discuss Troilus and Cressida, a so called play by Shakespeare. Thought I'd wind up with one of the lesser known ones that you don't generally see performed as much as the more popular plays. I've never seen it performed live. Obviously, I've seen some productions on recordings of staged productions and so forth, and so it is called a problem play because it doesn't easily fit into, not because it's a problem, but because it doesn't easily fit into one of the categories of comedy, tragedy, romance. It has comic elements and romantic elements. Troilus and Cressida are two lovers who are split apart during the course of the play, and they really do not have a romantic ending. So it's spoiler alert for a 420-year-old play. But um, the tone of it is starts out. The tone of it is very. It's really interesting. It addresses the events that are covered in the Iliad, and so for Shakespeare's time, this would be a story that many, at least the educated theater goers, would be familiar with, but even the uneducated, might have some knowledge of the classic stories, and um, as sort of the normal, repertoire of what the stories that folks would know. So they would know who Ulysses was, who Achilles was, Hector, and so forth. All the major characters from the Iliad as mythic figures, which of course they are, and the the tone of the play though is really taking everybody down a peg for the most part, and so Ulysses is sort of um, a bit of a blowhard political type. Achilles is lazy and ineffectual through much of the play. The plot, aside from the plot that involves Troilus and Cressida and their romance, eventually what happens is they are uh, split apart because Cressida is given as a sort of a hostage exchange or prisoner exchange, and so they are split apart soon after pledging their troths to each other, and so the context of all of this is that the Trojan War has been going on for at least 7 years at the outset of the play, and so there's a some fatigue that's going on, and yet there's also among some of the characters these attempts by Ulysses and Nestor, who is relatively Nestor is relatively wise, is an older character. Hector, of course, on the Trojan side is portrayed as heroic, if ill-fated. Uh, Again, he's slain before the end of the play, uh, and so Troilus and Cressida are on the Trojan side, and um, so their romance is split apart when there's a prisoner exchange, as I mentioned, and so Cressida goes over to the Greeks, and it sort of mirrors in some ways the romance between or the was Paris, quote unquote, kidnapping or making off with Helen, or Helen, who was on the Greek side and was, made off with Paris, leaving her husband Menelaus on the Greek side. And so, whether it's voluntary or not, she is to whatever extent it is, she's now with Paris and living as man and wife. And then Cressida is split apart from Troilus and ends up with Diomedes on the Greek side of things. And is unfaithful to Troilus and with Diomedes. And so that's the romantic part of the play, or semi-romantic part, with some comic elements as to the portrayal of the characters. Uh, there's and then there's um, the military side of things, or the actual battles or machinations that deal with Ulysses trying to get Achilles to fight, and does so by, in fact, instead championing Ajax to go fight Hector, thinking that would shame Achilles into fighting, and then it goes on from there. So um, the Thersites is a Greek character who is kind of, I guess you'd call him a rogue or scurrilous in behavior, but often speaks truth. So he's one of the characters who is characterizing the mythic figures in the play and knocking them down a peg. And then Cassandra is the figure who's she's just nuts, and but when she comes through and is giving her wild inflamed speeches, she also speaks there's always a seed of truth in there, with Shakespeare, if there's a fool or a deranged person, or a doddering old man, often you can find the kernel of truth in what they're saying, either in an ironic sense, uh, or earnestly. You just kind of have to, do a little analysis to see which it is. But anyway, the as I mentioned in one of the earlier Shakespeare talks, it's always handy to have, we have our collections and the big book of Shakespeare and all the complete works and everything. But really, for ease of carrying things around and doing a little reading on the fly, these budget paperbacks, you just can't beat them. And I mentioned in the past episode about going to half price books or a used bookstore, and to just see what they have and grab a couple for a low price. And shortly after doing that, I in fact was at half price books, and just as an aside, picked up the complete poems of John Donne, one of the major English poets, uh, uh, for $2. And so, he spent a lifetime of classical poetry in this one book for $2. Can't beat that. And then Pulitzer Prize winning Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides, which I have not read that, but fancy sticker and all, also $2. So of entertainment and education from just a few bucks. So that's the as I was saying, that there was with Shakespeare's time at writing this. I won't say it was presumed knowledge for everybody, but it was. These characters were known, and there is a discussion by Ulysses in Act One that lays out. I don't think there's a direct reference to Aristotle, but his language and cadence and the topic of what makes a man and how people behave definitely harkens back to the works of Aristotle. So there are these classical references in Shakespeare, and it's nice to make those connections to go from Aristotle Hamlet, Ulysses by James Joyce, that have these interconnections and references, and I hope we don't. I hope we can maintain that, and recognize those things, and um, that's the value of the learning the great works of the canon of Western literature, is being able to trace those things. You can trace from Socrates to Plato to Aristotle. They taught each other in that order. They were the mentors to each other, and Aristotle taught Alexander the Great, and those historical connections are just something to learn and make references. But anyway, the so it's Troilus and Cressida is very interesting. I'd like to see it done live, if done well, and with the different if as long as I think you go in expecting it, taking it in context, and that the tone is a little mixed, but generally speaking, it is humanizing mythic figures. That's what I take from it. Humanizing these mythic figures, and then you can then apply that to today's topics, for example, and found some, for example, you know, doddering old man, or unworthy politicians. Kind of apply those things as you see fit, in just about every direction, and so you see again the humanity in that Shakespeare depicts. And this is, again, nothing new that I'm coming up with. Harold Bloom has a great work. Um, Shakespeare, the invention of the human, and that analyzes each play. And I recommend taking a look at that if you haven't. But anyway, so the excerpt today is going to be from Act 5, and this is after Troilus has seen that Cressida was unfaithful uh, to him with Diomedes, and Troilus is with Ulysses and Thersites, and they're hidden. And so this is. We'll start with Thersites, and then Ulysses, and then Troilus trumps in. But Thersites again is sort of the rough scoundrel type character who says things as they are, very bluntly. A proof of strength she could not publish more, unless she said, "My mind is now turned whore." And Ulysses responds, "All's done, my lord." And Troilus, "It is. Why stay we then?" And then Troilus goes on, "To make a recordation to my soul of every syllable that here was spoke. But if I tell how these two did co-act, shall I not lie, and that doth invert the attest of eyes and ears, as if those organs had deceptious functions, created only to calumniate? Was Cressid here? I cannot conjure, Trojan. She was not, sure. Most sure she was. Why, my negation hath no taste of madness, nor mine, my lord. Cressid was here, but now." Then Troilus goes on. "Let it not be believed for womanhood. Think we had mothers, do not give advantage to stubborn critics, apt without a theme for deprivation, to square the general sex by Cressid's rule. Rather think this not Cressid." And Ulysses, "What hath she done, prince, that could soil our mothers?" "Nothing at all, unless that this were she." Thersites, "Will a swagger himself out on one's own eyes?" With his plaintive, not really rage, well, because it depends on how it's acted, but his plaintive, plaintive um, soliloquy here. "This she? No, this is Diomedes, Cressida. If beauty have a soul, this is not she. If souls guide vows, if vows be sanctimonies, if sanctimony be the God's delight, if there be rule in unity itself, this was not she. O madness of discourse that cause sets up with and against itself. Bifold authority, where reason can revolt without perdition, and loss assume all reason. Without revolt, that is and is not Cressida. Within my soul there doth conduce a fight of this strange nature, that a thing inseparate divides more wider than the sky and earth, and yet the spacious breadth of this division admits no orifex for a point as subtle as Arachne's broken woof to enter. Instance, O instance, strong as Pluto's gates, Cressida is mine, tied with the bonds of heaven. Instance, O instance, strong as heaven itself, the bonds of heaven are slipped, dissolved, and loosed. And with another knot, 5-finger tied, the fractions of her faith, orts of her love, the fragments, scraps, the hits, and greasy relics of her o'er-eaten faith are given to Diomed. And so that is Troilus saddened, to say the least, and facing that the reality of what has happened, based on Cressida's unfaithfulness and perhaps his foolishness for uh, being so committed to her, is a part of it. But anyway, I'd like to hear if you've seen Troilus and Cressida, or if you take the chance to read it, what you think about it, or any other Shakespeare plays, or if you have any suggestions or comments. Put them in the comments below, and we will be doing a few more episodes in this week. I have the new Sarah Grand novel is coming out. I think publication day was yesterday. Pre-ordered, do not have it yet, but I hope to have it soon. And I always recommend her books, but we'll see how this new one is. And then a couple of other variety of episodes coming your way. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for your time. And until next time, read harder.